afternoon. Today we will study about the basic course of English grammar. The first class is about the comprehension of a story and classifying a word into a unit of a story. There are 4 units that a story is defined as a phrase, a clause, a predicate, and a sentence. The comprehension of a story. A story is conveyed to the listeners from a speaker. The story is conveyed by the speaker on the premise that the speaker and the listeners are in the conversation, and the story describes a subject. The speaker and the subject can be the same or cannot be the same. So the speaker and the subject of a story can be different. Okay. The speaker conveys a story about himself or about plus the speaker can convey the story about a person or a thing that do not participate in the conversation with the speaker. So the story can be described in the first, second, or third narrative. There are 3 perspectives to describe a story. The perspective is the speaker's. The speaker has the perspective. The first narrative story is about the speaker himself. So there is a clause. Let's take a look at it. I am a student. This clause is about the speaker. The subject of the clause is indicated by the pronoun I. The second narrative story is about the listeners. The listeners are in the conversation with the speaker, right? There is a clause, you're kind. The listeners in the conversation always as plural subject, because even though the speaker conversates with the only one listener, the speaker knows the story of the speaker can be propagated at the same time when the conversation between the only listener and the speaker takes place. Like this, my voice can be leaked out of the classroom. A student who is not in the classroom can hear what I say, and the student is not the expected student in my perspective as a speaker. And after the conversation between the speaker and the only listener is finished, the only listener can propagate about the conversation between the speaker. So the story from the speaker can be propagated after the conversation is finished. So the speaker is always aware that the listeners are plural. The third narrative story is about a subject that is not in the conversation with the speaker. The subject of the story does not participate in the conversation with the speaker. The subject can be a person or a thing. There is a clause. He is generous. The subject of this clause is a man who is not a participant of the conversation with the speaker. So this clause is described in the third narrative. A story consists of words, right? Plus the word has its own trait before the word is applied in the story to convey the intention of the speaker. So the trait that the word has can be divided to the first trait of the word is that the word indicates an object. The second trait of the word is that the word describes the object. There is a clause and the subject of the clause is an ice cream. An ice cream indicates an object. As soon as I tell you the word ice cream with the descriptive word on, which means that the ice cream is an object that is defined with the general definition of an ice cream. So a phrase of a noun, an ice cream, indicates an object, right? Can you imagine an ice cream? The word an ice cream makes us imagine the object, the image of the ice cream, and the word an ice cream is linked. As soon as we say the word an ice cream, the object of the ice cream is indicated. How about the other part of the clause? Is sweet. The two words is and sweet describe the same subject of the clause, right? So the first descriptive word is describes the existence of the subject, an ice cream. And the second descriptive word, sweet, describes the condition of the subject, an ice cream. The word has its own trait. The trait of a word is classified two. The first trait of the word is the indication. The second trait of a word is the description, right? The word, which is either an indication of an object or a description about an object, constitutes a story. A story focuses on the function to describe the intention of the speaker with the story. However, the speaker can classify the story into the new criterion. The story can be classified 4 units: a phrase, a clause, a predicate, and a sentence. Okay, let's say a phrase is a series of words without both the subject and a verb to describe the subject. There is a phrase. Let's take a look at it. A delicious ice cream. This phrase is with two descriptions and two indications. The object indicated by the words ice cream is just an object, which is then a subject of a story. So the descriptions with the words "a" and "delicious" describe the object. Next, a clause is the unit of a sentence with a subject and a verb. A story with a subject is needed to be described by a description, by a verb. So a subject and a verb constitutes a clause. For example, an owl sleeps. There is a subject indicated by the word owl, and the indicative word owl is described by a word on. And then the phrase an owl is described by the descriptive word sleeps. So the subject of the clause is an owl, and the verb of this clause is sleeps. So the three words a clause. A word with its own trait to indicate an object or to describe the object has its own role in a clause. So a word or a series of words can function as a constituent of a clause. There are 4 constituents: a subject, an object, a complement, and a phrase of a verb. The constituents of a clause are as a subject, an object, a complement, or a phrase of a verb. Each constituent forming a clause is important for the 2 reasons. The first reason is about the structure. The constituent makes the structure of the clause complete. This means the constituent is consistent with the rules of grammar. So there are specific rules that each word has to be arranged in the right order. The constituent makes the structure of the clause complete. The second reason why the constituent is important is that the constituent is applied to convey the intention of the speaker. The second reason is more about the definition of the words. Each word is applied to convey the intention of the speaker. So the constituent conveys the clear intention of the speaker in the clause. The subject and the verb are necessary to constitute a clause. So the existence of the subject and the verb is prerequisite to form a complete clause. Compared to the subject and the phrase of the verb, the object and the complement are applied in the clause selectively. The type of the subject and the verb determines whether the object or the complement is applied in the clause to convey the intention of the speaker properly. The example number 1, there isn't any object or complement. The owl sleeps. This clause is constituted by the subject and the verb. The owl is described by the verb to describe the action of the subject. We have to compare this first clause to the second clause. The second clause is that I buy you. The second clause is constituted by a subject, a verb, and an object. Of this second clause, you. The subject and the verb of the second clause need an object to convey the definition of the verb, the subject, object, and complement. The subject in the clause interacts with an object. This means, for example, the second clause in the previous page, the subject of the clause, who is the speaker, conveys the action, bite, to the listeners, right? So the speaker interacts with the listeners, who are the of the clause, right? And the subject in the clause does not interact with the object according to the type of the verb. This means the subject of the first exemplary clause indicated by the phrase of indicative word owl. The subject, the owl, does not interact with any object because the definition of the descriptive word sleeps does not need any object to convey the action of the subject, the owl, to any object. The action of sleep started from the subject and finished by the subject as well. So the action sleeps does not need any object. So we can witness the interaction between the subject and object, and we can witness there isn't any interaction from the subject to the object. We can say that the content of the interaction between the subject of the clause and the object of the clause is defined by 3 steps. The first step is the experience of the subject. The second step is the condition of the subject. Last, the third step is the action of the subject. The subject of the clause I buy you is the speaker. The second exemplary clause is described with the first narrative, right? And this clause, I by you, is about the speaker himself. The subject in a clause starts the interaction with an object. The interaction between the subject and the object is called the interaction between a subject and the object. The subject of the clause to start the interaction to give the action bite. Who are the listeners? There is about the speaker. So the clause starts with the pronoun, the indicative word, I. And the descriptive word to describe the action of the speaker is say, right? And the object conveyed the action from the speaker is a saying. In this clause, the object of the action saying is the clause you're kind. So the speaker interacts with an object, which is a clause. And we will look into the clause. We will look into the object of the verb say. The object of the verb say is the clause you're kind. The clause you're kind is a description about the listeners. So the clause you're kind describes the condition of the listeners. The condition of the listeners is not conveyed to the object. The object is conveyed the description from the subject. The subject of a clause can convey the experience, condition, or action to the object, which is more than one. So the object of a clause can be one or two. With the existence of the preposition, there can be more than 3 or 4 objects in a clause. There is a clause. I tell you a story. The subject of the clause, who is the speaker himself, conveys the action of the speaker. The action of the speaker is indicated by the verb tell, right? The action indicated by the word tell is conveyed to 2 objects. The first object conveyed the action from the speaker, who is the subject of the clause, is a story. So the action of the speaker is conveyed a story first, and then the story is conveyed to the other object. The action of the speaker is conveyed to in a sequence of time, right? The first object auxiliary is conveyed the definition of the verb tell from the speaker directly. So the object auxiliary is the direct object in this clause. More specifically, the verb tell. The second object indicated by the word you who are conveyed the action of the speaker, the description about the subject is conveyed to an object or objects, or the description about the subject is not conveyed to any object. This is consistent with the trait of the description. The trait of the description to describe the subject is called transitivity. Can I say the description of the subject with the word a verb? A verb with the transitivity is the transitive verb, and the verb without the transitivity is the intransitive verb. The transitive verb conveys or transfers the definition of the verb from the subject to the object. We can take a look at the second exemplary clause, I by you. The verb bite is the transitive verb because the action of the verb bite is conveyed from the speaker, who is the subject of the clause, to the indicated by the indication you. Compared to this second exemplary clause, the first exemplary clause describes the subject with the intransitive verb sleeps. The verb sleeps is the transitive verb because the action described by the verb sleeps to any object. Whether the definition of the verb to describe a subject is determined by the transitivity of the verb. The third constituent of a clause is the complement. There are two complements to describe a subject of a clause or to describe the object of a transitive verb. Let's take a look at from the subjective complement. Subjective complement describes the subject. The subjective complement describes how the subject is. It's about the condition surrounding the subject. The subjective complement describes what the subject is. In the case that the subject is a thing, and the subjective complement describes who the subject is. In the case, the subject is a person. Okay, there are two exemplary clauses. The sixth one is this. You look happy. You look happy. In this clause, the descriptive word happy describes the subjects of the clause. The subjects of the clause are listeners, right? So the descriptive word happy is the subjective complement. In this clause, we are students. The indicative word student describes who the subjects are. The subjects of the clause are people, to include the speaker. So the subjective complement student describes the subject. The complement to describe the object of the transitive verb is the objective complement. The objective complement describes the object as the subjective complement describes the subject. The objective complement describes how the object is. The objective complement describes what the object is in the case that the object is something, and the objective complement describes who the object is in the case that the object is a person. There are two exemplary clauses. Let's figure out what the objective complement in these two clauses. The eighth one, I make you happy, is about the speaker. The subject of the clause is the speaker, and the action indicated by the verb make is transferred to the object who are the listeners in the conversation. The descriptive word happy describes the condition of the listeners. The condition of the listeners about surroundings. The condition of the object sets a premise that the object exists. The existence also sets two premises. The first premise of the existence of this object is about time. The object inevitably exists at a point in time. The second premise of the existence of the object is that the object exists at a place. So the existence of the object happens. The first premise of the existence of the object is time, is about time. And the second premise of the existence of the object is about the place. The object existing at a place, at a point in time and a place is surrounded by the environment. So the condition happens to be from the existence of the object. The condition of the object starts from the inner state of the object. For example, happy describes the inner state of the object listeners, right? And then the condition of the object reaches out the surroundings, every surrounding. So the descriptive word happy describes the condition of the object listeners as the objective complement. This clause is about the speaker. So the subject of the clause is the speaker. And the verb call, indicated by the verb call, describes the action of the speaker. The action of the speaker is conveyed, is transferred to the object, who are the listeners of the conversation. The indicative word stars describes who the objects are. So the indicative word stars are the objective complement of the clause. Let's go back to the classification of a story with the function of the story. The third classification to a story starts from the clause. The clause without the subject is called the predicate. So the predicate is the remaining part of the clause except the subject of the verb. So a clause consists of a subject and a predicate, right? The last classification to a story is the sentence. The sentence is a clause or a group of clauses more than two. So a sentence, the speaker conveys the intention with a clause as a sentence. A speaker conveys the intention with clauses as a unit to describe the exact intention of the speaker. Thank you for watching.